a really good one lined up for today, so I'm excited. We have a lovely lady coming on board to tell us about her experience, because we are going to be again examining aspects of utilizing the divine feminine energy to shift the paradigm of what's happening in Australia and New Zealand. And so she is an example of someone who has stood up to the system, and although she hasn't as yet been what you would say, I guess, successful in a sense, but she's successful because she stood her ground and she's pursuing it as well. She's not giving up. And it's sort of the type of energy as well that we're talking about tonight, is what she's embodying with her actions. It's the what's the one that stood up to Goliath? What's his name again?
David.
That's it. David and Goliath standing up. Yeah, exactly. So that's great. So we'll just wait for a few more people to come on board. Well, we might start. Oh, there's Jessica. Hi, Jessica.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, lovely. Jessica's our special guest that's talking tonight about her warrior woman experience. And so looking forward to hearing all about that. So we might start by just, first of all, acknowledgement of the traditional custodians. So we begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today throughout Australia, and pay our respects to their elders past and present. We extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And of course, the original people are in our thoughts at the moment with everything happening around Australia. And so we're sending our love and our light and our prayers to them at the moment for the highest levels of protection for them. So I'd like to just start by collectively setting up our temple space, or our sacred spiritual space. It's a lot of S's. And so just calling in our spirit guides, our angels, our spiritual teachers and masters, our galactic family of light, our entire spiritual team. You may choose to call in your dragons as well. We had a couple of weeks ago a brilliant session with Malaysian spiritual master, and he called in the dragons and the lions to work with us. It was really incredible. I'll have to get him back again. So if you'd like to come. So yeah, just taking a moment to set up your own space. And centering yourself in your flame of divine unconditional love in your heart center, and seeing your flame of divine unconditional love surrounding your body and your aura, and then expanding it around the group so that we're all nurtured in this beautiful divine unconditionally loving energy. And then if you choose, you can also expand it around your house, and then extend it to your township where you're living. And then emanating from that heart center out to the state that you're living in. And then out to the country that you're in. And then surrounding this beautiful, unconditionally loving heart flame around the planet, and even extending it out into the infinite cosmos. Feeling your energy expanding. And then if you choose, also surrounding yourself and even the planet in a flame of ultraviolet purple flame, just to transmute anything that no longer serves us or serves the planet. Everyone just mute your microphones, please. Oh. Okay, and so now we're centered in that flame of divine unconditional love and the ultraviolet purple flame. I'd just like to pass the baton to the lovely Jessica Watson. I sent out in the email some photos of Jessica, and Jessica has, I wish she can tell you the whole story herself, but she's gone up against the system in terms of masking, and she has met, a lot of opposition, but she hasn't given up. She's undaunted. She's kept persevering. And, I'd like to ask you about how it all evolved and what sort of, qualities that you had to draw on to be able to move forward in this, the inner qualities that you were able to draw on to be able to stay your course and to not give up. And they're a lot of the qualities that we'll be focusing on tonight. So you're a really great example of that. So I'd like to also acknowledge you for everything that you've done, for standing in your authentic truth and standing up for the collective. It's not an easy thing to do. And so, I really want to acknowledge you and honour you for that. And, it's wonderful to have you here. So thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you very much for having me. I'm honoured. My name is Jess. I have been with Qantas as cabin crew for, I would be going on 9 years as of next January. And October 2020, we were essentially stood back up. For most of that year, we were stood down. So I would say probably 4 to 5 months of that year, we were stood down just due to, everything that was going on in the world. And then later on in the year, Qantas decided to stand us up, and they introduced a mask policy, which was mandated. And the policy was that you must wear your mask from the moment you get out of your car in the car park until the moment you get back in your car after you've done your, anywhere up to 12-hour shift, where you work in an environment at 8,000 feet. So it's essentially already, reduced oxygen. So when they brought out the policy, they said, there is obviously the option to go for a mask exemption. And with that, they had some paperwork, which was, you had to take to your doctor to specify the reasons as to why you couldn't wear a mask. So we'd had sort of pockets of mask mandates in Brisbane, where I come from, and I was on top of it straight away. I went to my doctor, who is incredibly supportive, and he basically wrote me a mask exemption. So not that I was carrying that around, with me in the streets of Brisbane or anything like that, but I knew that I'd had that, which came from basically, it was the exception that the Queensland Health had said was okay. So I took the paperwork that Qantas had provided in regards to the mask exemption to my doctor, and my doctor is really, really strict on doctor-patient confidentiality. So one of the questions was, what does Jessica suffer from? So he didn't feel it necessary to, disclose that information. So he said, listen, I'm not going to say that you suffer with anything in particular, but I will say that whenever you wear the mask, it makes you anxious. So I then took that to Qantas Medical, and that it was a flat out no. And their words were, sorry, you do not qualify for the mask exemption because anxiety is not an excuse to wear a mask. So I was really taken aback by that. I didn't think that there would be such resistance. I thought, well, this is interesting because, part of Queensland Health's exemptions is that you can not wear a mask if you feel you know, you don't even need to get it. In Queensland, you didn't even need to get a medical certificate. It was totally on the onus of the individual whether or not you wanted to wear a mask. So I was sort of taken aback, and I thought, okay, that's interesting. So then I went back to the doctor the very next day and I said, okay, you're going to have to disclose what it is I'm suffering with. My medical conditions include Hashimoto's, which is autoimmune. And I also have a frontal bone tumor, which sits just here. It is benign. But I'd only found that out when I was on stand down, that I had that. So that was already causing me a bit of anxiety, because I was coming to terms with, you know, what this meant and how it's going to affect my life. What's the prognosis going into the future? You know, what am I going to, you know, be faced with, and this, that, and the other. So I went back to Qantas with my second medical certificate, in which my doctor had disclosed what it was that I was suffering with. And I spoke to the Qantas medical nurse, and she said, you know, basically stand by, I'll take it to the doctors and we'll be in touch. So I was essentially flying around for almost 3 months unmasked. There was a flight where I operated to Hobart, and then we were picking up crew in Hobart, and we then become passengers. So we essentially aren't operating that flight. We just sit down like any other regular passenger and, you know, fly home. And as I was sitting in my seat, I had people just, it was awful. It was like I had so many people asking me where my mask was, what's my name, where's my identification. I just felt like it was awful. I felt like a lamb to the slaughter on the plane. Like I was pretty much the only one not wearing a mask. So we took off, and the next thing I sort of turn around and I could see this lady sort of sitting behind me in the row, sort of back to the left, with her phone out taking photos of me. And I was really, again, taken aback, and I didn't know how to handle the situation. To be honest, I became incredibly uncomfortable and riddled with anxiety, because I just felt like I was just on display. And eventually sort of got home, and then, as it turns out, that lady was somebody in Queensland Parliament, and she'd made a formal complaint to Qantas as to why I wasn't wearing a mask. And that's when it basically escalated. So from then on, it was kind of like, you know, it doesn't really matter. You know, we know you're out there not wearing a mask, but now that we've had this formal complaint from this member of Parliament, then we need to do something about it. So it really took off quite quickly. I ended up going to the Human Rights Advocates Facebook page, because I could see they were doing a lot of work with, you know, big companies and not allowing people into their shop without a mask, and they were having a lot of success. So I did make a formal complaint to Human Rights Advocates, and they essentially started to represent me. And from there, it sort of didn't go, you know, too far. I think that Qantas thought that I was calling their bluff. So it was the Human Rights Advocates who actually recommended a lawyer. And so this lawyer is in Brisbane, and he's doing amazing work for people such as myself, who are not going to put up with this discrimination.
They're not going to put up. What his name is, Jess?
His name's Rob Greeley.
I know him. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So he took it on straight away. Yeah. And we basically went to the Fair Work. So that's the first point of call for us. And, you know, Qantas were very much saying you need to come to work with a mask, or don't come at all. And eventually they just put me in a predicament where they said, you know, if you don't come to work by this specific date wearing a mask, then you will be facing disciplinary action up to and including termination. So my lawyer basically said, no worries. We can see that for myself that I don't have a choice, and that wearing a mask at work is going to affect my health. And so we went with it. So we basically put in an application to have a conciliation with Fair Work. And, you know, over the months, it goes back and forth, and you try and come to a settlement. And I tried to stress, you know, with Rob, that for me, this is not about money. This is not about, you know, getting, you know, back at Qantas or whatever for, you know, the damages they've put me through. It's never been about that, because for me, it's very much, making a wrong right. And if I can set a precedence so that other people can go to work without having to wear a mask because, their health suffers or they feel uncomfortable, then for me, that's a huge win, because, that's what it's all about. It's just trying to right a wrong. So we end up going, backwards and forwards with the Fair Work Commission, and we had our hearing on the 1st of September, and it was about maybe 4 weeks later that we got the result, which was dismissal. So they based that no, Qantas have not discriminated against me medically, and in fact they didn't even terminate me. I resigned. So essentially what they're saying is that because I chose to not go to work because I wear a mask, or I didn't want to wear a mask and I wasn't complying with their mask mandate, that I essentially resigned. So there's been no indication from me that I have resigned. That's complete crap. So now we're in a position where we need to appeal that decision. So I had a good chat to my lawyer about it, Rob, and he said, listen, to appeal this decision, that you're going to be coming up against a really strong narrative, which is essentially corrupt. And you're not going to only have one commissioner there, you're going to have 4. And the last time that a commissioner come up against the system was in a case not long ago with a lady who was questioning or, going up against the mandatory flu jab because she'd had, serious adverse reactions. And there was one commissioner that basically stood up for her, and that commissioner now longer works for the Fair Work Commission. They've basically been booted off the panel. So
wasn't that
so the risk is really massive. And if I go against this,
sorry, wasn't that an out-of-court settlement? So it wasn't actually an in-court settlement to set a precedent. Wasn't it an out-of-court settlement?
No, so we were
a reference, but it wasn't actually a precedent. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's still in the Fair Work. So to appeal this decision with Fair Work, it would mean that we would go to High Court.
Mm-hmm.
So you would.
You're freezing a little bit. Sorry, Jess, you're freezing a little bit. Could
maybe maybe they don't like what I'm saying.
Well, that's true too. Yes, exactly. It wouldn't be surprised. So you was just, we missed that last bit. You're going to continue to the High Court. Is that was what you were saying?
Correct. So yeah, and it sort of came about, like a bit of a left field way around it, because I just had the biggest decision to make, and I would like to think I'm young. I'm only 37. I've got 2 young children. I've got a husband. We've got a lot on our plate in terms of, just this year alone. I mean, just a little side story. When I was terminated from Qantas, I found myself in aged care, and I was doing, sort of admin in aged care from a customer service perspective. And then, come 17th of September, they're like, you don't have a job if you're not, injected with COVID jabs. So I'm like, you can't be serious. This is 2 jobs in 12 months. Like, so I then found myself again sort of going, I don't know where to go with this. And you don't worry, I'm taking on that as well. But for the moment, I just need to focus on Qantas. So so that's a big decision. And if I lose, which it's probably, there's a this because the narrative is so strong and the system is so corrupt that would really, really hurt my family. Big decisions to make, and then it was last Friday, close of business. I needed to let Rob know about my decisions and whether or not I was going to go forward with appealing the Fair Work decision. And if I chose not to, then we were going to go down the Human Rights Commission route, which is basically discrimination, not so much, the mask mandate, but more from a discrimination perspective. So Thursday night, and I just didn't know where to go with it, because my moral compass and my value system is so strong that for me to sort of let this go was really difficult. Like, it was just not something that I could, lie down and let it just pass over. For me, that would be worse. Like, I would much rather risk everything than allow this injustice. I just can't do that. That's just not who I am. So Thursday night came around. I had a random phone call from a friend of mine who, I was telling the story to, and she said, I know somebody who could help you get, this appeal out of, sort of the mainstream, judiciary and into sort of more constitution. So I'm like, okay, tell me about this. So this person, his name is Glenn, and he's an expert in HR, and he's been dealing with a lot of these injustices for many, many years, and been to the High Court and been successful. So
and he's dealt with a lot of, I know him as well as our friend, so he has dealt with a lot of psychiatric cases where people have been forced to have psychiatric drugs and they haven't wanted to, and then he's gone against the system that does that, the big pharma, and he's won every time. He's won about 5 cases at least. So he's done a great job.
Yeah. So, Friday afternoon, I come, Thursday night, I'm just sort of, backwards and forwards in my own mind. And then my husband and I had sort of organised for the kids to go with my mum for the weekend, because we'd booked a trip to, Moreton Island Rex, and we're going to go camping and just leave the world behind for a few days. So come Friday, it's absolutely torrential rain. So my husband and I are like, look, we can't think of anything worse than setting up a camp, in pouring rain. So we're just going to postpone our trip till the following morning, which was going to be Saturday. So, and the really uncanny thing is that most of that Friday, I was dealing with Glenn in figuring out a way around appealing this Fair Work decision. So it's really funny how things work, because I would never have been able to do that from an island with, barely any reception. So to me, that's very God-driven, and I'm now dealing with Glenn, and that's basically up until today. So that's where I'm at.
Wow. So what are the qualities that you had to sort of really sort of dig deep to find, to be able to really go forward with this and to persist? What were the sort of qualities that you had to tap into within yourself, do you think?
Oh, gosh, that's a really good question. I think, you know what? Part of me actually thinks that I've been guided. I feel like that I'm being pushed, and I've said many times to my family, who have been so supportive, and I'm so grateful for that, because I could imagine, what it would be like if there, I was surrounded by non-supportive people. Like, don't get me wrong, my mental health has suffered, and I've been up and down, and I've been all over the place. But at the end of the day, I feel like I've been guided, and I've said to my family many times, I don't have a choice. I literally don't have a choice. I'm doing this because I can feel myself being pulled in a direction. And I guess I've just always been I've always tried to be positive. I've always tried to think, this is not right. But if somebody can stand up and say something and it make a difference to one person, 5 people, hundreds of people, thousands of people, that to me is just, I couldn't ask for anything more. So it's very much just trying to be, I guess, brave, and just know that inside everything will be okay, but it's just something that I have to do.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's so commendable. To be that sort of strong in the eye of the storm. So I'm sure that everyone feels that way. And, if there's anything that we can do to support you in any way, please let us know.
Thank you.
And keep us posted too on how it all unfolds.
Definitely.
We're all behind you, and we're with you in spirit. So yeah.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to tell my story. It's not, it's not very public. The only sort of publicity that this story has had, to be honest, is is a bogus article that was in the Australian, the Daily Telegraph, the Epoch Times, and it was put out on, I think it was early November, and I don't read the mainstream. I don't read mainstream media at all, so I'm totally aware of the fake news. But it was actually my doctor who sent it to me and said, we've made the news, and immediately I thought, yes, we've made the news, and people are going to hear my story. And then, without me telling it, obviously, and I read the article, and it got me. I was gutted, because the entire article was just so, it was fabricated. It was filled with inaccuracies, and it actually made me out to look like a menace to Qantas, basically. And the whole thing was, this girl suffers with no medical conditions, we would never terminate her, just absolute bollocks. It was just, so for me to be able to tell my story, it's actually quite cathartic, because it's only really my family and friends who know what I've gone through, but to share it is I'm super grateful.
Oh, you're so welcome, and I'll put it on my channel if I can as well. That'd be great. We all can see how mainstream media are just following that specific, very narrow agenda, and it's becoming more and more obvious to most people. So, I don't take any heed of anything they say at all, and in fact they often invert the truth, so it's completely the opposite of the truth. So so many of us recognize that. You've got some comments there from Ariel. Big blessings, Jessica or Jess. And truly commendable, amazing. So
thank you very much. It means the world.
Yeah, so stay really strong, and I hope that you can join in our energy work today, because
I would love to.
Oh, lovely, because it's all about tapping into these reserves within us when the going gets tough.